All right. Hello and welcome back. Super excited to share with you Erin Porter today because not only did I meet her at the Empower Her Live event that I went to in September, but in chatting with Erin just now, we are more connected than we thought, which is super cool. So we'll dive into some of that here in a moment. But welcome, Erin, to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. And I literally have loved our connection. I was like, oh yeah, we got a podcast too. I was just gonna go start talking about everything else.
Yeah, we could just, chat away and not record, but here we are. Yeah, so we'll just give the listeners just a little inside scoop. So Erin and I are both Ohio natives, which is super cool. But then we're also connected to a mutual, I would say, I'm not connected to him anymore, but through a mutual connection that we both know. So how freaking cool is that? That this truly is just a small world that,
Mhm.
we are connected to people way more than we realize. So I love that. But Erin, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast because, like I said, I heard you on the stage at the Empower Her Live event, but prior to that, I had heard you having a conversation with Keisha Get Mary on her podcast, and I have to say that that was the first time that I had really heard of you and your story. And I was just, first of all, blown away by the connections that you and I both have, our stories. And so today I really want to talk with you about nervous system dysregulation, because that is something that, through all of my journey through, healing my body, doing all the tests, and they came back, quote unquote, normal. I realized with my doctor's help that it wasn't anything other than nervous system dysregulation. Like I was feeling all these things because my body was super out of whack in terms of my nervous system. So I would love for you to share your journey into realizing that for yourself, and just, hopefully in you sharing that, other women might be able to connect and realize, holy cow, like I'm dealing with that too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, the thing is like we all, like from societal levels and just life and the way that we're programmed, like a lot of us are running around with this and quite, we don't quite know, right? Like we see a lot of the symptoms. We have a lot of the adrenal fatigue, the chronic fatigue, the gut stuff, all of that. But we're like, okay, well, yes, I'm going to go do all these things to work it. But it's like, if you're doing all of that, which is great, but you're not getting to the root, which is your nervous system, you're going to help it a little bit, but it's not going to create that long term. And one other thing before I kind of get into my story, I was just talking about this yesterday because someone was telling me, they're like, I'm resting, I'm resting, I'm resting. And I'm like, and they're like, it's not getting better. And I'm like, the thing is I'm like, you're resting, but your body isn't feeling safe in the rest. And it's not rest. It's kind of just like dissociating, which again, it's any rest is helpful, but I'm like, you're not kind of getting that true restoration and rejuvenation that your system is looking for. And that's where I realized a lot for myself, a little bit of my background. I mean, I've been very much like high achiever, go, 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 do all the things. Grew up in the Midwest for very much everything. And I think this is like this in a lot of places, but you're kind of defined by what you do, not necessarily celebrated for who you are. And so I spent most of my life where I felt very much safe. I felt in control. I felt peaceful when I could achieve. Like the more I could achieve, the more love I would receive. And that's just how I lived my life. So I was, the president of everything that you could be the president of, worked 9,000 jobs, did everything. And my mom always jokes because like before I started kindergarten, I wanted to ride my bike without training wheels, blow bubble with bubble gum, tie my shoes, learn how to read. And like my parents didn't put that pressure on me. It was more of myself trying to find control. And I used my body essentially to find control my entire life. I had an eating disorder, had a lot of burnout, had mono, chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue, and like I said, an eating disorder. So all of that chaos and stress and pushing and going and doing throughout my life, I'd end up in the hospital and they'd be like, what's wrong with you? And my dad was a nurse, and he's like, Erin, I think it's stress. And I'm like, it's not stress. There's something else going on. Like, he's like, you got to slow down. I'm like, I'm not going to slow down. I'm just going to go do whatever, I need to like keep going, keep achieving. He's like, maybe don't be the president of 25 things at one time, like pick one. But I couldn't do that. And so I really hit a big burnout moment where I kind of found out that I had adrenal fatigue in 2017. I already knew I had chronic fatigue because I'd spent about 2 weeks in the hospital when I was a freshman in high school from having mono, and then my spleen got really enlarged. So like I always had this, I'm tired, and I was always sick. And when I was burnt out that was like right as I was beginning, like not really just beginning my entrepreneurship journey, but a couple years into it. And I realized I'm like, okay, I can't keep operating this, like shoving my schedule with a million things. And I understood that actually through inner child healing. So I was working with somebody and they helped me to realize like, oh, this is your little girl that's running the show, and she needs to do all of these things in order to feel safe, worthy, loved, and enough. And so once I started pulling back some of that, that's where everything else from like childhood and life began to unearth itself. And what I realized was, and I think a lot of people can kind of relate to this at different points in their journey, is I did a lot of personal development work, listened to all the books, did all the podcasts, went to all of the events, but I wasn't actually getting to the root. Like I would try to think positive about something, and that's a very helpful thing to know how to do. But until you get into the body, especially with this stuff, and you get into the soma and you start doing somatic based sessions, you're supporting it in different ways. You got like your band-aids are getting bigger, I'll put it that way, but you're still not getting to like that deeper root cause, because trauma, emotions, all of that, they don't, I was just saying, like, they don't poop them out. Like they just get stuck in the body and they like come up as disease in the body. And so until you're processing those emotions, processing somatically all the sensations that are stored, you just keep hitting a lot of, I know at least I felt this way, I kept hitting a lot of walls where I'm like, okay, this isn't working. All these supplements aren't working. They're helping, but I'm still getting a little bit and then feeling like I'm not sustaining it. And so, yeah, the somatic work is really what helped me understand how dysregulated my nervous system was, and what really helped me to, I still have moments, obviously we all get dysregulated. It's not about being perfect, but my bounce back time is so much quicker, and I have so much more capacity in my nervous system to do the things that I want to do without hitting burnout.
That's huge. And I again have to say there are so many parallels between you and I, that you've shared before, and then you just reiterated here too. Like, I mean, also I come from a family that was not pushing me to do anything. But again, in my being innately, that's just how I operate. It was like, I have to do these things. It makes me feel good to be doing these things. I think maybe some of it also, like you said, is societal too. You see people and you're like, oh, they're doing all these things, so I want to, emulate that. That looks like something that I want to do as well, to be quote unquote, uh, accomplished or achieve all the things, right? Like you said. So I resonate with that. And I too also, I haven't shared this with you, but I also too had an eating disorder.
Mm.
So I think there's so many parallels in how you kind of get to this state of being of like, holy crap, my body is like giving out on me because I've exhausted all options. And I really, not even I've exhausted all options, but I've exhausted all of my resources. And now what? Like, I have nothing left to give. My body has nothing left to give me because I've used it all and I haven't listened to myself and stopped. So I appreciate you sharing your journey. And because I think, again, a lot of women hear either mine or yours and can resonate with many of the things that you said of like, holy cow, yeah, I also have felt that same way. I'm curious, as you've gone on this journey, what have been some of the obstacles in healing yourself, in terms of whether it's, maybe leaving people behind that don't get that you're, having to reconceptualize how you are going to, conduct yourself, or whether it's, you physically, like not feeling like, oh gosh, like I know I should rest and I know I should not have my schedule booked, but maybe just this one day I'm gonna, book myself up with all these things. Like, how has how has that changed for you? And what was the process like of you, really realizing like, I got to do this because,
Mhm.
if I don't, I may not be here for as long
Yeah.
as I want to.
Totally. I think two things that you're sharing that keep coming up, which have I probably have been my biggest lessons, are one, boundaries,
Mm,
because my lack of boundaries and my codependency were a huge root cause of all of the dysregulation as well. For me, I needed everybody else to feel okay for me to feel okay, which means I couldn't sit in my own discomfort. And if I could fix you and make your life better, or if you were having an emotional experience and I could do something to help that, then then that would make me feel enough. And so a lot of the codependency stuff popped up, and I did have to leave a lot of relationships, just leaving people behind, whether that was romantic partners or whether that was friends. And it's still constantly a process because we're always pulling back layers of the onion. Like, I went through a breakup from a couple year relationship back in April, and it was just things where I'm like, my nervous system, like, I have a lot more somatic awareness now. My body wasn't feeling that connection, and I would feel a lot of stress. I'd feel a lot of the sensations. I'm like, I can either ignore this and continue to stuff it down like I did most of my life, or I can lean into it and be with the discomfort that's actually here. And those things are painful. And also, too, like, no matter how resourced or how many tools that you have, anytime something traumatic happens, your body's still going to have an aftermath of an experience of it. Like,
mm,
the tools are there to help you. But I think a big thing I had to learn was boundaries, not putting everybody else first, actually caring first for myself, which in my mind growing up had always been like taught as like selfish. And so I think there was like a big thing of needing to realize that, of like, oh no, I can't do this thing, or like being okay with letting people down has just kind of been something where I'm like, okay, I'm just going to be okay with that. And it's still hard sometimes, for sure. So boundaries, codependency, and there's one other. Oh, like learning how to actually receive. Like, if somebody would try to support me with something, especially in the beginning, or they give me a compliment, I could receive, like, I was described as like this little energetic bubble. Like, I could receive it to about right here, or I could receive it like mentally, but I couldn't actually let good things come into my body and fully be in well-being. My unconscious belief process was always like, good things come, but good things leave very, very quick. And I would always be setting myself up. And this is called developmental disappointment and attachment trauma, where it's like your fear of success, but you're also fear of disappointment. So you kind of tiptoe, and it's like, there's a lot of good things coming my way, but I don't want to actually receive them because what if they leave, or what if they abandon me, or what if I get rejected? And so you kind of leave everything on the outside of your orbit, because letting it in means that there's a fear of it going back out. So I had to also like understand that and work a lot of those relational dynamics in my life, because again, like, I'm the common denominator in all of these things. So if I don't work on this, I'm just going to keep repeating these patterns. And like, same thing, I want to have kids someday. I don't want them to have to repeat. Like, they're going to have their own things that they repeat, but I'm like, there's something within this, both generations past and generations to come, that I got to work on and lean into.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, and I also think too, I don't know how much of this you resonate with, but I feel that part of my issue in um dealing with re-regulating my nervous system is that I will tell myself, well, it's just easier to keep on doing all the things because then I keep myself busy, right? And I don't have to think. It's harder, right? We know it's harder to sit in the uncomfortable and to process everything than it is to just keep going, 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 and doing, because then you're just kind of passively going through the motions, so to speak, right? So is that something that you resonate with, or like,
Oh
I know
yeah.
you also work with women too? Is that something that you hear commonly?
Every single day of my life, people are like, I really want to rest, but I'm like, And then people will try to like go do a lot of like restful things, but their nervous system's actually not ready. Like you can almost like re-traumatize yourself if you go too much, too fast, too soon, the opposite way. And to what your point was, is like our nervous systems seek the familiar, whether that's a familiar, not great thing, or whether it's a familiar good thing. Like we know the path of least resistance. We know that we don't have to deal with all of the stuff internally if these protectors are on of doing, going. It's way easier. So we're gonna do that, but we also have to learn what's called like in somatic work, like titrating, where it's like, okay, yes, you've spent your entire life's existence going. If we just try to invite in, people will try to do a 30-minute meditation and they're like, I can't meditate. I'm like, yeah, because like you're trying to swing the pendulum all the way to the opposite side. Plus there's other things to take into consideration with that neurodiversity, different things too. But I'm like, you have to maybe start with 5 minutes. And if you're in, let's say, like a super flight mode or maybe even a freeze mode, different things, like just trying to meditate might not actually be good, because if you're stuck on freeze or you're stuck on off, that's not going to help you remove some of your energy. Some of us get stuck on, some of us get stuck on off, and you need different tools and techniques to like get some of that movement happening in the nervous system. So I don't even remember what your question was, but that is the rabbit hole that I went down, because it's
Yeah.
like I think people have good intentions to try things, but it's like you don't know if that's actually going to be good for your system, or if it's just going to add more stress to it. Then I watch people get burnt out and stressed, almost like looping and healing, because they don't have the right tools to support with that.
Yeah, no, you answered it and then some. So I love that. And I love the analogy, or I guess not necessarily an analogy, but maybe it is. I don't know. Brain is fried. But the visual that I get with the pendulum, because yeah, that is so true. We, especially as high achievers, we want all or nothing, right? So if
Mhm.
we're going to try and, fix ourselves or get ourselves back to quote unquote, feeling good and quote unquote normal, we naturally want to go all the way over, right? And
Mhm.
not just incrementally get ourselves back there in the time that it takes us to do so. We just want to get it all done right now. But as we know, as you know, as I know, as many of the women know listening, we just don't want to, you know, acknowledge it, so to speak. It takes a long time. Like it, and the more you try to force it, the longer it's going to take. And so you're actually, it's counterintuitive to try and force it all, because you're going to be spending a lot longer than you would if you just, incrementally and titrate, like you said, to your point, incrementally get there, when and how your body sees fit.
Yeah, that's what I was telling people. I'm like, you can't achieve your way into your healing journey.
Yeah.
Like that worked, quote unquote, over there, but like you can't do that in your healing. It doesn't work that way. You gotta like come outside of the pattern from a different element of the pattern.
Yeah. So you talked about, everybody is going to need different strategies and ways to help them cope and support the healing process. What are some of the things that we can do, if we are hearing this as a listener right now and thinking, oh my gosh, like I resonate with Kelly and Erin. I feel like I have some nervous system dysregulation. I mean, shoot, who doesn't?
Mm.
So everyone that's listening has some, right? To what extent is, determined by who you are and what you're dealing with. But what are some things that we can start to do, like right now, to, like we said, incrementally move the pendulum?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I want to note with this is like little practices don't need to be, 30-minute or 1 hour things. Like it's actually how I tell people to think about your nervous system. I'm like, like when your dog goes outside and then they like shake and then they come back in and they shake, they're regulating their nervous system when they're doing that. You can do the same thing. It's actually helpful to do little tiny things throughout the day to discharge when you need to, or to recharge when you need to. Some things that I love that are just like easy, quickie is tapping, emotional freedom techniques. That it's rooted in Chinese medicine. The meridians are similar to like what you're working with acupuncture or acupressure, and tapping on those. Like one I always tell people, I'm like, if you tap on the collarbone, it's connected to the kidney meridian, which is where we hold like general stress, fear, anxiety. Like I always will tap here, like especially if there's a little bit like turbulence on an airplane. I'm like, all right, we're just gonna tap and like that'll help set. But like doing stuff like that or going through a full EFT sequence, little breath work techniques. It doesn't have to be a full long breath work, although those are great. You can do just some box breathing, which is into the nose for 4, holding up at the top for 4, exhaling out for 4, holding at the bottom for 4. Other things too that are going to be a little bit more like both of those are more are somatic, but it's just some other things that I think are very easy that people don't think about. Our nervous systems, we're always thinking that we're getting chased by lions. Like that's just where we operate all day. And so it's like if you're transitioning from family to work to business, whatever, when you get into a new space, let your body arrive. So
Yeah.
like if I'm arriving right here in this moment with you, like I can notice my walls are safe. I might feel like the chair that I'm sitting on, might feel my feet on the floor. I'm noticing my breath. Like I'm just letting my body actually feel safe. If you're resting, you also want to do that too, because we have to train the nervous system to know that rest is safe. And if you don't invite in those little things that tell you that rest is safe, guess where you're going to be resting from? Your mind. And you're going to sit there being like, I should be doing more. I should be doing this, blah, blah, blah. All of that's going to run through your head. And also to just even check in throughout the day and just notice what you're feeling in your body. We very much are beings that can report about the weather versus being in the weather, meaning I can quote unquote tell you how I'm feeling, but I can't speak from, right? That's been something I've had to work on is speak from the emotion, speak from the sensation. And so practice actually bringing awareness to like, oh, I notice like there's a little, like I'm holding energy. Like people will be in session with me and I'm like, you're gripping, like you're telling me a story. And they're like, yeah, everything's great. And I'm like, uh-huh. And your whole back is really tight and you have a death grip on your chair. And like, oh my gosh, like I do this all the time. And I'm like, yeah, so like there's so much more. And then like we start to unravel that and they're like, oh my gosh, like all the things break through from that point. But it's like just notice like what are you feeling in your body? And then also what are you feeling in your body and what do I need in this moment? We all have unmet needs from childhood and we also have unmet needs that just happen throughout our life. We want to practice meeting our needs internally, like self to self, but even also like if I'm going to be in connection with somebody, like I'm hanging out with somebody on Zoom or like in real life, like I try to let my nervous system feel, oh, hey, there's another nervous system here with me and get some healthy co-regulation. Of course, if the person's like healthy, if they're not healthy, don't try to co-regulate with them. But like little things like that are just such simple practices that we can take in to find more safety and calm in our nervous system.
Oh, I love the co-regulating with someone else. I've never heard that before, but I love that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
I
super.
co-regulate all day. Like that's literally healing the attachment system, which is what a lot of our dysregulation is from, is all of those relational dynamics, neither needs getting met or not met.
Whoa, that's
Yeah.
a big nugget to take with you. Co-regulate with healthy people. Do
Totally.
it. I love that. So you've talked several times about somatic healing, and some of us may know what that is, and some of us may not. So can you speak to what somatic healing is and why that is so super important for us in the healing process?
Yeah, so somatic healing is going to be more of like a bottom up approach to healing. So if you're listening to this and you're in therapy, you probably do a lot of talk based therapy where you're talking things out, which is great. I feel like where a lot of people start, like we have the awareness of it. And then somatic work is working more so in the body, so bottom up. So what we're doing within that is we're noticing the sensations that are happening in the body. And like when you're working with a practitioner, they're also tracking moment to moment what's happening in your body too. A lot of times people think, to heal trauma, they have to go back and relive it. And trauma is more about what's happening in the here and now. So as people will tell me something, and I did this with my practitioner as well. It's like, yeah, I had a bunch of car accidents, but like everything's good. And she's like, you're literally smiling as you're telling me about like 3 traumatic events. And she was like, you're bracing this entire time and you keep doing this motion. So like what I'm trained to do is kind of like watch where the nervous system goes, where the energy goes, and then being able to just kind of like track some of those things that we do very much unconsciously and think about it where we're holding all of those like life events and all of those experiences and emotions in the body. The thing is, though, is like we're still moving from them. We're moving from these points in consciousness where we got stuck, and now we're trying to operate from that. And so somatic healing helps to like discharge it, kind of like the dog thing that I was sharing saying earlier, like discharge all of those emotions. So then you don't keep going and reenacting everything that's happening from those events. So there's somatic work that kind of works like that. Anything that's getting into your body, breath work, tapping are also somatic healing. The work that I do is a little bit more somatic experiencing. And then also I do a modality called attachment repair. So it's a lot of co-regulating. It's a lot of noticing what parts are popping up. So it has some work in internal family systems. To give a little bit of context about what that is like, think of like inside of you, you have like an inner orphanage of little children, and they all took on different protection strategies to keep you safe. And so then what they do is anytime there's overwhelm or there's dysregulation in the nervous system, they put on their armor and they're like, this is my protection strategy. The thing is, though, is then you're constantly moving through life from a protection strategy versus your true self. And so what I'll do is help kind of understand, okay, what do those protection strategies need to kind of disarm them a little bit? And then you can move more from regulation versus moving from protection. So yes, think somatics, think body, think bottom up. It's quiet a lot of the time. So there's not always like verbally talking and processing, but it's just moving a lot of that coiled, bound energy in the system out so you can have more spaciousness, freedom, and regulation in your life.
Wow. I love that. I selfishly, I'm going to ask this for myself because I am one that is getting ready to transition from my current job to potentially a new path.
Mhm.
So for some, and I know there are several women that listen in that are on that same, trajectory as myself. So for those of us who are dealing with nervous system dysregulation and wanting to heal, but are also almost getting ready to trigger ourselves into the more dysregulation because it's like, oh my gosh, starting a new job and is everything going to work out? New environment, new people that we're working with, just everything's kind of flipped on its head. What are maybe some what are some tips, some strategies and things that someone like myself and others that are listening could do to help continue to move the pendulum in the right
Mhm.
direction without regressing and going, back into that mode of like, well, I'm just going to fill my time to, numb out and, yeah, I'm going to transition, but I'm just going to pile on all these other things so that as I transition, the stress is, out of sight, out of mind because I'm doing all these other things. What are maybe some things we could do to support not going
Yeah.
back into that negative pattern?
Yeah, on like a self to self sort of thing, I think awareness is always key, right? Like you have to kind of notice and commit it, just as like you commit to like a workout plan or something like that. Like this is your internal workout plan, and you have to make it a priority, even if it's little things throughout the day, that you're bringing awareness. It's like, okay, I'm noticing as I'm transitioning, I'm starting to do X, Y, and Z. Let me pause. What am I feeling in my body? What's coming up for me? What do I need in this moment? Like kind of being in that constant place, and as you're moving throughout the day of like, what am I noticing, what am I needing, and practice that. I feel like that's such an easy thing that you can do. And knowing too, and I think this is where we have to kind of release some of those parts that have a lot of judgment, is that it has to be perfect or it has to look a certain way. And it's like the thing is, it's like you're going to do it and you're going to get dysregulated, and then you're going to have to like re-regulate. Like it's sometimes people then almost don't, they avoid trying to have any dysregulation, which is impossible because they're like, I don't want to get back into that dysregulated state. And I think something that's really beautiful from internal family systems is no parts left behind. So it's like all of the parts of you that are freaking out while you're in the transition, you have to, instead of trying to get rid of them, instead of being like, I don't want to feel this way, it's like invite them along with you on the journey. Bring those parts of you because they spent, 30 whatever years supporting you on your journey. If you try to just get rid of them, they're gonna come back with a vengeance. So it's like you have to invite those parts along with you, let them feel like, hey, we're doing this thing, we're going here. Like I'll bring my parts along so then they can kind of see from that new lens. So I think those are great self to self ones. And also, like, we can't necessarily see when we're operating from a part or when we're operating from truth. Like, it gets a little bit easier. So, like, working with someone to be able to help you go, oh, okay, I'm completely in pattern here and I'm not even seeing it. Or I'm saying one thing, but my body's telling a completely different story. Like, having mirrors with that in life, whether that's, a somatic therapist or whether that's someone in your life that can kind of maybe point that out, like, that's going to be really, really helpful because we can't get out of it without being able to be mirrored it and have a deeper understanding of it.
That's huge. Yeah. Bringing the parts along. I like that. Yeah. It makes total sense too. Just they are all part of you. So why not bring everything with you and have your full body feel that experience? And
Totally.
yeah, oh my gosh, I love this. I love you. I love this. This
I'm
has
so
been
glad.
such an incredible conversation. Erin, how can women get in touch with you? Because you got like so much going on, girlfriend, like so many things. Like I know you've got a podcast, I know you've got a book, you've got so many different ways to work with you. So can you share some of the best ways to connect with you? And then of course I'll have everything in the show
Yeah.
notes as well.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm pretty much Erin Nicole Coaching, like wherever you go. I have the Energetics of Business podcast, and I do have a book. It's called Burnout to Breakthrough. It's got a lot of just like little tangible things and pieces of my story, a lot of reflection questions. And then I work with people one to one, and I also train people in subconscious and somatic modalities. A lot of people will take that work to do it with others, but some people just love it for themselves and like the people in their life. So yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at everywhere you go.
That's awesome. Well, I'll have all of that in the show notes for women to connect with you. But Erin, this has been incredible. I'm sure
Yeah.
we're gonna connect again. I know I'll have you back on the podcast because I feel like this could be a series. We could have you come on and talk about so many different things because there's just so much that you have to offer, so much you have to share, and just your story connects with so many women, such as myself. So I see a lot of myself in you, and I see what you're doing to support yourself, and you're an inspiration to me. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun. I love like all of our divine connections.
Too. Yay. Yay, yay, yay.